If everything goes according to plan, this truck should be running by the end of this video. Now, you'll know based on the title of this video. I don't know right now, but you do. So hopefully this thing's running by the end of this video. Welcome back to the channel, guys, where today, like I said, we're hoping to get this truck running. So as you saw in the last episode, I made this list of basically what I need to get not only the truck running, but also moving under its own power. I want to specify that. For example, I don't need a drive shaft to make it run, but I need a drive shaft to make it move. So that's what I was going for. So based on what we had done last episode, we did the transmission temp gauge sensor. We did the starter and the solenoid for that. We did finish the brake lines, did the coolant temp sensor. We did the heater hoses and then started modifying that upper radiator hose for the wide bridge. And then finally we did the power steering front seal. So what I have left that I'm going to be starting on in today's video is, like I said, the rear drive shaft. I'm going to pull the U-joints out of it, scuff the whole shaft and the yoke, and then paint it up so that tomorrow I can put in the new U-joints, put the yoke back on the shaft, and then install it in the truck. And then fuel filler necks, I want to get those on so that I can put fuel in it. I decided against sealing and filling the diffs. It's not going to be moving very far, so I'm not even going to worry about the diffs at this point. And then bleed the brakes. I'm thinking I'm probably going to have to pull that master back off and bench bleed it. Then once that's done, I can bleed the system. So let's just jump right into it. So like I said, I finished off this Y bridge. I put all the clamps on, and then as you can see, that hose runs down to the throttle body up into this port here. And then the hose just comes along, goes to the upper port on the radiator. Now, because of this high mount AC compressor setup, this hose is a little close to this belt. So when I have the fans on, I'll have some sort of clip system that'll hold this hose up like this. It'll give me just a little bit more room in there. And then, as you can see, my intake is right there as well. And the intake is sitting a little high. So I'm probably gonna have to do some sort of custom fabrication to get some sort of intake tube, preferably over top of this. Might have to even go underneath it. So I'm kind of waiting until I have an outer fender and an inner fender before I do that to know where the filter should end up. So I just temporarily put the mass airflow sensor in right now and plugged it in just so that the truck will run properly. So I got the shaft and the yoke tore apart and painted up last night. And I let them dry overnight, and they're nice and dry now. So next thing I'm gonna do, put the U-joints in, put both the U-joints in the shaft, and then put the yoke back on the shaft. And then hopefully we can install it in the truck. With the drive shaft painted, U-joints installed and installed into the truck, we can now cross this off the list. So what I'm actually going to go into now is I'm going to try bleeding the brakes. So the system is completely dry, so I'm going to pull the master cylinder off and bench bleed it. That's the best way to ensure you're not going to have any air in the system, and then from there you can go ahead and bleed your lines. So I'm going to pull that off right now and try bench bleeding it. basically what I've been doing, now this might vary based on the type of master cylinder you have, but my understanding is you push this in. They want it to be less than an inch. If you go more than an inch, you have the risk of wrecking the seals inside. So less than an inch, you hold it for about 30 seconds, the bubbles will rise, and you just keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And then hopefully if there's no air in there, you don't see any more bubbles rising. But yeah, you hold it for 30 seconds, then you release, and then you let it sit for another roughly 30 seconds or so. Just let everything kind of settle back into its spot. And then basically you keep going until you get it to where this will not push farther than about 1/8 of an inch in there, because that's when you have solid brakes, because I have the 2 holes plugged on the side here. So when this doesn't move much, that means your air is completely out of the system and it's not going to be spongy in here. So I think I have this. Well, I'll let it go once more. So after doing this a few more times, probably did it a total of 7 or 8 times, push on this, and I don't get much movement, maybe 1/8 of an inch, to 1/4 of an inch, something like that. I don't see any more bubbles rising, so I'm gonna say that this is bled, which means I can put it back on the truck and then hook up the lines, and then I'll crack the bleeders on each individual corner and I'll let it gravity bleed itself. So off camera, put the master cylinder back on, hooked it all back up, and then I actually went around and I bled it all the way around all 4 corners. I just did gravity bleeding, like I said, because when you think about it, master is the highest point of your system. And when you have nothing else in the system, you crack the bleeder on, you start at the furthest corner away, and it'll slowly make its way down around through the truck. Because of gravity, it's gonna just keep going down, obviously. And then it's pushing the air out of that bleeder that's cracked, so it just slowly makes its way there. Now that first one, because it's all the way at the other corner of the truck, I did actually hook up a vacuum pump to it. So I pulled it, once I got the fluid to the bleeder screw, then I let it gravity bleed from there. And then obviously you start that corner, that corner, that corner, to this corner. You start the furthest away and work your way towards the master. And it seems like it's all right. There's not really a good way to tell until it's running and you have vacuum going to the booster, but the pedal feels all right, and there wasn't a lot of air coming out when I was done, so it should be all right, at least for now. And then I went ahead and picked up the fluid I need for this first start. So I have 2 jugs, it's about 8 liters of coolant. Once it's mixed, it'll be about 16, which is more than enough, obviously. This is the orange Dex Cool. Not sure if you really need it, but I bought it anyway. I have the engine oil, takes 5 liters and change. I have cheaper ATF, just a 5-liter jug, Dex 3, because I found out that the transfer case actually takes a Dex 2 or higher. So I will be putting that in the transfer case. And then I have synthetic Castrol Dex 6 for the 4L60 transmission. 2 jugs of that, which is 10 liters, I believe. Yeah, it's 10 liters. Which should be enough. I'm just gonna put 5 liters in for the first start. Won't put it in gear or anything, but have 5 liters in there just to start, and then I can kind of see where it is from there. And then I just picked up another jug of DOT3 brake fluid. And according to this list, once I cross that off, not worrying about the diffs right now. TK's breather isn't a big deal right now. Fuel filler next, I will get 1 on one of the tanks, and then the fans I'm not worrying about right now either. So what I am going to do now, I think I'm gonna start with the transfer case, and then I can fill that up. Probably dump one of those jugs of ATF into the transmission, fill it with 5 liters of engine oil, and probably mix some coolant and start putting it in there as well. So this video has taken course over the last week or so. It's been a little bit here and there in the evenings, been a really busy week. You'll see why, it'll be shown on the channel, but you'll see why. So tonight the goal is to get this thing to fire up. So in the last clips you saw me fill this thing with oil, transfer case is full, engine has 5 liters in it, probably still needs another half a liter, but I'm gonna leave it. Transmission, I put 5 liters in it because that's how much it says you're supposed to put in for a drain and refill. Probably gonna need more, but we're not gonna be moving it tonight. And it has about 4 or 5 liters of coolant in it, just enough to start circulating. And again, I'm probably not gonna fill that up completely either. A little bit in power steering pump so that you're not running the pump dry, and then brakes like I showed before. So last thing that's left is really just fuel. I put a filler neck on the driver's side, so I'm going to put roughly 3-4 gallons of fuel in it, and then I'll probably leave the fuel pump relays out and crank it over till I get oil pressure, make sure I'm seeing oil pressure on the gauge, and then probably put in the left fuel pump relay so that I don't accidentally run the right pump because there's nothing in it, and again, don't run the pump dry. So put the left fuel pump relay in, put the switch on the left, and then hopefully if I have the tanks wired properly, the left fuel pump should come on. Do that a couple times, cycle the key so that it gets all the fuel pressure up, test for fuel pressure at the rail, and then if all checks out good, we should be good to fire it. So let's just see what happens here. So yet another day has gone by. Like I said in the clip before this, we were gonna start it, and we did get it started. However, I did not film it. I was so distracted by everything, so nervous that something was gonna go wrong, I just kind of forgot to film it. So I'm gonna give you the rundown on what happened. So I put fuel in it, you saw that, and then I left the fuel pump relay out, cranked the engine over with oil in it till I got oil pressure. Once I had oil pressure, put the fuel pump relay in, and then ran the fuel pump, make sure that was all working. And then on the valve on the fuel rail, just press it in, get all the air out of the system until it pressured up, cycled the key probably a good 15-20 times until I had a decent fuel pressure, and then went ahead and cranked it, and it fired and it would die. Did that a couple times, so then I started feathering the gas a little bit, and then once I did that, it figured out its idle, it figured out what it was doing, mainly I think because this engine has been sitting for a couple of years now without running. So it kind of figured out what was going on, figured out the new tuning adjustments, and then it started to idle really good. So it's cold now, like I said, it's the next day, so I'm gonna try and fire this up here. Hopefully it works like it did last night. There you can hear the fuel pump runs for 5 seconds or so when you start to turn the key on. And then I'll go ahead and crank it over. And it fires up. Runs pretty good. Still a little rough when it's cold. I still need to figure out a decent intake system and exhaust system. But it runs now and it idles. And as you can see, fuel gauge is working. Oil pressure, got about 42 pounds of oil pressure. Temperature gauge was working last night. It was up to about 80 degrees, I had it. So that's all working like it should. And it's also charging, which is great. It's sitting about 15 volts. And actually, surprisingly, I didn't have anything major coming up for codes. I had a code for alternator charging circuit. That's just because the signal wire doesn't get hooked up in harness rework. So that's what this wire is. It just doesn't get hooked up to anything, so it's going to throw a code for that. And then the oil pressure as well, because you delete the oil pressure sending unit when you do this, because the ECM doesn't really need to know oil pressure. You just put that aftermarket one in down there by the filter. So those were the only codes I got. Eventually, after I was running for a while, I got bank 1 and 2 lean, but I'm gonna wait until I have a full exhaust system to see if that remains steady or not. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. I know this is probably a bit of a longer one just because of all the extra little stuff I needed to get done in order to get this thing started, but it starts, it runs, it idles. We had it in gear and it was trying to move, but the tires are kind of flat. So I bet you if I put some air in the tire, put a little more fluid in the tranny, it would move no problem. So, and like I said earlier, I've been really busy this week. I actually picked up a new vehicle, so that will be in the next video. It has a blown engine, so that's going to be coming next. I'm not gonna tell you what it is yet, but you'll just have to wait and see for next week's video. So be sure to like this video, be sure to subscribe, be sure to comment, because that all helps out so much. I've been growing a lot in the last month or so here, so I'm hoping this video does really well as well. So like I said, any bit of support helps a ton. So with that being said, we're gonna see you guys in the next one.